Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second Dóchas webinar of 2022. My name is Aisling Byrne, and I am part of the Mental Health and Wellbeing Working Group, the Irish Support Agency. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that I'm hosting this webinar from the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands of which you may be watching from. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Land was never ceded, and this was and always will be Aboriginal land. So Dóchas will be brought to you on the first Monday of every month, and each session explores a different aspect of mental health and well-being. All of our previous webinars can be found on the ISA YouTube channel. So today we are going to be discussing International Women's Day. The theme this year is breaking the bias. So we want to celebrate all women, especially those that face adversity, and we want to celebrate the empowering of these sectors of women and lift them up in any way that we can. So I don't know about all of you, but my feelings on International Women's Day change with every year. This time last year, all over Australia, we were marching for justice, women's rights, their safety in the home, the workplace, and even the Parliament buildings in Canberra. We've heard many stories over the past year coming from home in Ireland and our homes here in Australia. And so just to begin the webinar, we're going to share a moment of silence for all of the women who have lost their lives or been affected by gender-based violence in the last year. So we'll just take a moment now. Okay, so thank you for that. Kicking off our International Women's Day event, we asked people to submit nominations for outstanding women in their lives that they don't feel that get enough recognition and they deserve to be held up. So we got lots of submissions through our social media, and I'll be reading some of them out at the very end. So stay tuned for that if you're getting a shout out. But our first guest is four-time Paralympic swimmer Ellen Keane. She's a Tokyo 2021 gold medalist. She's from Clontarf, Dublin, and you might recognise her from this year's Dancing with the Stars. If only we could vote from here, she'd get so many votes. But she's doing quite well. She's through to the quarterfinals as of this morning. And she's also an advocate for disability awareness and rights back at home. And I caught up with her earlier this week and I asked her some questions. So I'll just be sharing that recording now. So Ellen, what does International Women's Day mean to you, if anything at all? And does its meaning change over the years for you?
It's a weird one because like I'm in a world where like sport is male dominated, and I spend a lot of time with men, and I tend to be with men usually on International Women's Day, and I hear the absolute like abuse that some men have to say about International Women's Day and why do women need a day, and I get just so annoyed because I literally start pointing out all the like inequalities, and it's not like obviously like I live in Ireland, you're Irish, it's probably the same in Australia where like as women we live pretty good lives, like not 100% equal to men, but like we're grand, but like the rest of the world, third world countries, like men just seem to forget the poverty that women kind of face and the inequalities. So when it comes to International Women's Day, all along I tend to just remind the men in my life about like what does go on. I'm not too fond of kind of like woohoo, women, woo, because I feel like
kind of that fake
really
positivity, that girl boss kind of. Yeah.
But it also scares the crap out of men. like that is the image of bra burning, like feminazi sort of vibe that men feel that is feminism, which it's not, and that they fear that that is what International Women's Day is all about, and trying to take over the world as women, which it's not. It's all about educating and informing about the inequalities in the world. So that's what I try to do.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to start us off on tonight. That's straight off the bat. We are white women, and we are extremely aware, always, but especially on International Women's Day, that we are white women and the inherent privilege that we have over women of colour in this world. So thank you for raising that point. And I hope everyone.
I didn't even know it was a point you guys wanted to talk about.
But no, I think that's a great point. And yeah, I think today we should all be very aware of that as well. So you touched a bit there on bias and just the general education that is promoted on International Women's Day. But as a woman with limb difference, what specific biases have you encountered throughout your life?
That I'm not able to do anything. Like I'm missing a hand. It's like as if you break a hand and you're just not able to use it. Like you adapt and you find ways of doing things, and I've never really had to adapt because I was born like this. So it's not like I had to learn a new way of doing things. I just had to learn a different way of doing things from the very beginning. And then it's kind of like the pity party, which I really, really hate. So I try to use my platform as much as possible just to get my kind of body out there and try and educate people on like disabilities and visibility. And for me, the more people see my body and the more people see differences, the more normalized it becomes. So the less likely they are to presume that you can't do things, the less likely they are to get shocked and be rude or stare or kind of be afraid as well. So that's kind of what I tend to try and do.
Yeah, excellent. And do you think that there's any difference between, you know, women with disabilities and men with disabilities and how they're treated in Ireland or worldwide? Or do you think there's just that general stigma and bias against people with disabilities, you know, the stares and the presumptions? You know, I've heard you say in the past that, you know, sometimes people will just stare and stay a mile away, or people will come up and insist that they need to help with something when you're perfectly capable of minding your own business.
Yeah, it's almost like some people have like a hero. They feel like they have a hero inside of them and they need to let it out, and they find the weakest link and they presume that a disabled person is the weakest link. So they have to act out their fantasy of being a hero. Yeah, there definitely is a difference between females and males with a disability. And I don't know if it's because like it's quite disgusting, like females with a disability are over sexualized, and there's weird fetish, and there's weird, like you get weird people following you on Instagram, weird DMs, and it happens from a very, very young age. And I haven't, it probably does happen to men, but I haven't come across any man that it's happened to. And I would know a lot of men with disabilities, whereas every single girl I know with a disability has had that happen to them. And it is just because we are that little bit more vulnerable. It's dangerous. So we're literally like the weakest link when it comes to rape, when it comes to just somebody wanting to do something bad. We're the weakest link, which is a shame to say. And I'm not proud to say that. It's just so weird. Like even like I remember I injured my hand and I was wearing a cast on my hand for like a day or something. But that night I went out with my friend And like when I had the cast on, I was getting so much attention from men. And then like, because it was one that you could take off. And I was like, I want to see if I take this off, what happens? And I took it off and nobody came near me. And then I put it back on and they all came near me again. And I was like, this is disgusting. Like, what is it about like, oh, I need to be the strong man for this poor girl. So that is kind of the main difference I see. But in terms of like men are treated the same in terms of the lack of accessibility, the lack of like, I actually think that sometimes people are more willing to help women than they are men. And that's also a shame. That's also an inequality. And it's also a thing that we should bring up and talk about a bit more. So yeah, that's what my experience is.
So you have the largest para-athlete platform in Ireland, arguably, and you are becoming a household name with every year of your career. Despite this, do you still face biases as a female athlete or as a para-athlete compared to other athletes?
I don't think so now as myself. But it's because I've had to work really hard at getting a profile and I've had to work really hard at gaining people's respect. But when you compare somebody else who might be on the same level to me, but just doesn't have the profile, but has a disability, they would probably not have as much respect. They would be looked down on, questioned a bit more. So unfortunately, it does come with like, you really have to fill the room, like compared to able-bodied athletes. An able-bodied athlete who wins a gold medal can just walk into a room without a profile or without having to say much, and everyone gasps around them. Whereas you really have to work hard to get your personality out there and show that you're more than your disability, which shouldn't be the way. And that's kind of why I'm doing it, because it hopefully it will pave the way for other athletes to just be athletes and not have to be the whole shebang.
Yeah. So you spoke a bit already about using your platform to try and raise awareness, but also normalise differently abled people in Ireland. Why does representation matter so much?
Because you can't get annoyed at somebody for not knowing something that they didn't know. And that's the case with disability in Ireland. Like, there's so many people that disability doesn't affect. So it's not in their mindset. It's not in their vocabularies. They don't know what to say. They don't know what to do. And that's because it hasn't been ingrained in people in education from when they're in school. It's not, they haven't seen it. They haven't seen it on ads. They haven't seen it on TV. They don't see people actively talking about disability. So how else are they supposed to act when they interact with someone with a disability? They're afraid of saying the wrong thing. So I don't ever feel like you should shame someone for not knowing what they don't know, because that's not their fault. What is their responsibility is, once they realize they don't know something, it's educating themselves. And it comes back to the Black Lives Matter. A lot of people didn't realize a lot of things that were going on, but then we all took upon ourselves to educate ourselves and to recognize our white privilege. And it's the same thing. Now we have to recognize our able-bodied privilege, because it is a privilege. You're able to access buildings, and it's just educating yourself. And it just, when it comes to representation, the more people see, the more likely they are to realize, oh, I actually don't know anything about this, so I'm going to educate myself.
And so yourself and Erica Cody are currently on Dancing with the Stars and absolutely smashing it. And, she is a great representation of an Irish Black woman in Ireland. And she is that woman on the TV screens every Sunday, alongside you, being that representation for, a lot of younger kids as well. Have you spoken to Erica about that at all? Have you bonded over that at all? Can you speak on that?
It's nearly like an unsaid thing that, like, we both know that we're there for a greater purpose as well. And there were times where, like, I might get upset and like she'd come over to me and like sometimes like carrying like I said it to her and I was like, sometimes I wish we could just be dancers on the show rather than this weight that we also have to carry, because it can be overwhelming and you can feel a great sense of responsibility. And like it's just having someone who relates. Like I don't know what she's been through, she doesn't know what I've been through, but on some level we understand each other because we haven't had the normal white privileged life. And and we know that we're there for her. And it's just like we were when we were practicing, we did a dress rehearsal and both of us were in the dance off for the dress rehearsal, and we made a joke to be like, they can't boot both of us off, they need at least one of us. Like they need both of us, like come on, you can't get rid of both of us.
The bias
it is
too obvious there if both you are in the bottom.
Yeah, it was a joke. But like we are aware, and I think we're both there for each other, and it's nice to have someone like that.
That's great that you have another woman in the competition to support you and you to support her, and it's really great to see. And there's no two better women that I know to be able to take that on your shoulders and be that representation for people in Ireland. So thank you for that. So just final two questions that maybe people in the webinar live tonight or looking at the webinar at a future date might be sitting here going, okay, but I don't know what to do. I don't know how I can help. So first of all, what are some myths that are out there about disabled people or disabled women that you would love to break right now if you had a magic wand?
I think there's like a big one that disabled people can't have sex. Disabled people can't have sex. And if their level of disability is more extreme, there's different ways of having sex. It's not like one size fits all. And I guess the main one would be that we're like angry at the world. I think there's a big stigma that disabled people like just want to complain and just want like are inapproachable and will snap at you. But like maybe that person's just had a bad day, as anyone has. Like if you really want to help, just ask somebody like, what can I do to make life better for people in a situation? Or if you're uncomfortable asking, like research it. There's so many things online that you could look up. And even my biggest resource is Instagram, because it's so friendly and it's so like quick and easy. And hashtags, if you look up hashtags like disability advocate, disability awareness, stay away from the hashtag disability, because that's where you might find fetish people. But disability awareness and advocate, and disability like information and education, there's so many like quick things up there that you can learn and you might realize you didn't know before.
That's great advice. Yeah, everyone has, a phone in their pockets. So going to Instagram, I love how you just described Instagram as a friendly place. As a verified person on Instagram, you mustn't get bogged down by any hate. I don't think you get a lot of hate anyway, but I think it just goes to show that you go into raising awareness and educating people and breaking the bias with compassion. And I think people really gravitate towards your platform because of that. As you said, yeah, people with disabilities aren't angry at the world. That's a funny one. So for the listeners, what are some everyday things people can do to make life more accessible to those with disability?
Just simple things of being sound, like make sure you don't sit in the disabled area on a bus. But if you are and the bus is crowded, don't make it obvious that you're like, don't make it a big deal when you're helping a disabled person. Just be sound. Like, I think it's when people make a big deal of helping a disabled person and they're like, I am here, I have come to save you. That's when we get pissed off. But like literally simple things that like people do that help me. Like when I go to my shop and they just start packing the bag for me. Like, I know they don't pack the bag for anyone else, but they'll pack the bag for me, but they won't say anything about, do you need a bag? Let me pack the bag. They just do it. And I think it's just doing things without having to ask, without, obviously, like, if it involves touching the person, do not do that. But just simple things of like holding the gate open when you see a person in a wheelchair coming, or holding the door open, and just being that little bit extra sound.
Yeah. I was thinking as well, here in Australia, maybe having a look and seeing where you work, if there's any disability awareness training, if your building has good disability access, bathrooms, elevators, ramps, that sort of thing. Maybe your kids' schools, do they get disability sort of education or accessibility there as well? Just kind of maybe just think about it over the next few weeks and think, oh, I've never thought about it from the lens of a disabled person, but maybe, work isn't as friendly as it could be, or my kid's school isn't as approachable as it could be.
Oh, and another one, if you have kids and your kid goes up to a disabled person, or like starts asking questions about a disabled person, the worst thing that you can do is kind of push them and tell them to stop, because what that does is their automatic reaction is then, oh, I should be afraid. And then the kid becomes afraid. And then that continues the cycle of people being afraid of disabled people. So like, kids aren't curious because we're disabled. Kids are curious because it's something they've never seen before and they don't understand. So they're going to ask questions like they would with anything. So just let kids be curious. I don't think any adult person will ever be rude to a kid. And if they are, they're a dickhead. So like, then you can say whatever you want to that person, disability or not. But just let your kids be curious. I think that's the most important one.
Yeah, just going in with like, generosity, curiosity, encouragement. And I think the takeaway message from today is just to be sound, as you said, have compassion, maybe take the extra step and think of things from another people's perspective, and encourage representation wherever possible, and diversity.
That's
well,
it.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Are you off to the pool or dancing, or where are you off to?
I'm going to get breakfast, and then I have to go to Dublin Airport to film a VT for the dancing, and then I'm going dancing.
Okay. Well, best of luck this Sunday. This webinar will be the day after Sunday, so best of luck. Hopefully we'll all be celebrating you in the webinar while you're asleep. We'll be asleep, and we'll be live. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, so that was Ellen. Hopefully maybe you got something out of that, or learned something new that you can just have a little think about. Evening is here with us tonight, and they are Associate Professor Julie Mooney Summers. Julie is a researcher and lecturer at the University of Sydney, and she uses her work to understand and advance the health of socially disadvantaged people and communities, and in particular lesbian, bisexual and queer women. So welcome, Julie, tonight.
Hi, everyone.
Thanks so much for being here.
I can't tell if the delay that's happening is on your end or my end.
Discuss your work with everyone. So just to start off, the same question.
Have we got you, Aisling?
Yeah.
I think your Wi-Fi's dropped out a little bit.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Am I back now?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I'll just go again with that question. So what does International Women's Day mean to you, if anything at all? And does its meaning change over the years at all?
Yeah, this was a really interesting question actually to reflect on, and thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to people. This is lovely. I think, like all the named days, like International Day Against Racism or any of those kind of days, it's supposed to be an opportunity to shine a light and reflect. That's what it feels like. I have to say, sometimes it hasn't meant very much to me at all. Like, I've been busy. There's been other things going on in my life. And also I'm involved in equity, diversity and inclusion projects at work. And there's always a danger that these kinds of days get kind of turned into events that are burdens for the people that they're supposed to be about. So you end up making cupcakes or turning up to 7:30 a.m. breakfast or doing things that feel a bit empty. My favorite International Women's Days is when I get an education that I wasn't expecting, like I just got. I feel like I just got an education from Ellen, which is awesome. I got one year. I remember really clearly hearing a group of women from the Pacific nations talking about the importance of reproductive health services, and it has really stayed with me. The things that I heard that day. This year, I'm involved in a couple of events, and I'm really thinking a lot about opportunities for people that we don't normally hear from or that I don't normally hear from. And so thinking about ways of sharing a platform or giving up a platform. So I was offered a spot and I said, hey, and I named a couple of other people who I thought would be better. Or that maybe I was the easy ask. And so I said, hey, what about you think about these other people? Tomorrow I'm talking at an event which is about sexual health and well-being, and I'm going to talk about gender diversity, and that feels like sharing a platform in terms of a topic. So this isn't what people are expecting us to be talking about in this space, and I think it's really important that we do. So I think, yeah, it's shifted around a lot.
Yeah, that's great. I really relate to that. I've kind of on the same train of thought this year, just kind of trying to bring up topics that I've never heard about on International Women's Day before. So yeah, speaking on, probably, I don't want you to have to repeat what you've already been speaking about at other events, but could you tell us a bit about your work, Julie, and the impact of that work as well?
Yeah, so I work at a university, so I do two quite different things. I teach postgraduate students, which I love, I absolutely love. I get to pass on knowledge and support learning, and also watch people develop mastery around something. And that moment when you see people get it and they can suddenly see possibilities for themselves in the future is such a privilege to be part of that. I'm very pleased that I get paid to do that work. And the other part of my work is research. And so I'm a social researcher, and I've worked in psychological research around premenstrual stress, sexual and reproductive health research, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health research. But the main work I do at the moment is around sexuality and gender diverse people's health. One of the things I do is I run a survey that happens every 2 years, which is about the health of lesbian, bisexual and queer women in Sydney. And it's been going for a long time. It's been running every 2 years for 25 years. Not all of those years were I wasn't involved in all of those years, but and I love that research because it's a partnership between a university and a community organization, and it allows that community organization to understand the needs and deliver services and advocate for funding, much the same as the Irish Support Agency does, right? So really to develop and deliver services to its own community, and that the people who are doing the research are from the community. And I think that's really powerful work.
Yeah, so that sort of leads me on to my next question. Why is representation and diversity in research so important? So could you just speak a little bit about how it's important to get this research on LBQ women in order to provide these services?
I was recalling what recently I did my undergraduate degree in London and in psychology. And I also at the same time happened to be involved in a direct action group called the Lesbian Avengers. So we used to go out and cause trouble in various things. This is kind of the mid-90s. And one of the ways we caused trouble was there was an American psychiatrist called Charles Socarides who came to do a conference presentation about his new book, which was about whether freedoms for homosexuals had gone too far. And he was all about how conversion therapy was a good thing. And it was the mid-90s. And we went to disrupt that event. And it was really shocking to me at the time that most of the knowledge that we had around gay and lesbian people at the time came from people like that. That's how knowledge was generated. And so I did my honours degree, my honours thesis on young lesbian women and mental health. And I've kind of been involved in that research throughout all of my career, and having the privilege of being involved in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander research has really brought home to me how important it is to think about not just whether research is getting done, but who is doing the research. So who is getting to make decisions about whether research should happen, what questions get asked, who gets asked them, and who is kind of involved in the production of the knowledge, I guess. And so I think kind of thinking both about the importance of the knowledge, but also thinking about who's involved in that production and how important it is that the people who are affected by the findings are part of the generation of those findings. I think that feels like that's really important.
Yes, absolutely. And it's great to see. Hopefully, you know, with every year, maybe every decade with research, there is greater diversity in who is being asked the questions and who is answering the questions. So maybe what do you think personally, or maybe if you can reflect on your data a little bit, what do you think are the major biases lesbian, bisexual, or queer women are facing currently?
This might be a bit of a surprising take on this, but I think one of the really big issues is a perception that lesbian, bisexual, and queer women are just women, that they don't need special attention, and that they're no different. So they should be treated the same as other women. So what's the kind of thing about? What's to talk about here? I'm in my mid-40s, and I remember when the right thing to do, being a good person, meant that you didn't pay attention to difference. You would say things like, oh, I don't see color, everyone's the same. I treat everyone the same. It doesn't matter if they're black or white or men or women or purple or they have spots. You know, I remember really clearly people saying that. I think we know better now that treating everyone the same means denying parts of their identity or their culture that are different to the majority. And that often those parts can be really important to people's sense of themselves. So while your sexuality, for example, might not be the most important thing about you, it's probably still quite important to you. And so to have it denied or to feel that you have to keep it private can be devastating. And I think that experience of rejection, or to feel like you have to pretend not to be yourself, whether that feeling is coming from family or school or church or health systems, can be crushing for people. And I think that sense of shame that people feel about I'm not worthy of love can lead to all kinds of health outcomes, negative health outcomes, not just mental health, but participating in risky behaviors, or even just not taking care of yourself because you don't feel like you're worthy of it. So it feels like there's something about a kind of a bias around not recognizing and celebrating those important parts of people's identities and their cultures.
Yeah, great. That's great insight. So on that, for everyone listening right now, going, oh my God, what can I do now that I know that? I know that there's so many women out there that feel that. What can I do, possibly to support LBQ women, anyone that has woman as their identifiers, and break those biases?
Do what Ellen says and just be sound. I think she was on the money. Look, I mean, there's lots of things, but I guess don't be a bystander. So there's something sometimes as a white woman, I'm in spaces and people say racist things and it really shocks me. And I think, you think that's okay to say. And me being quiet in this space makes it look like it's okay to say. So I think, you know, whether it's sexuality or any other ways in which people are marginalized, to be paying attention to the subtle discrimination that plays out when people aren't in the room, and because I think that, you know, all those jokes and what seems like harmless things when people aren't there reinforce and keep those ideas going. So I think finding ways to challenge those. Sort
of like microaggressions, is that the term you use?
Yeah, but I guess it's also microaggressions when those people aren't in the room. So, you know, it might be that there's no lesbians in the room, but people are telling jokes about lesbians. I kind of think that actually that's the kind of stuff that you need to also challenge. So I think keeping an eye on our language and not getting defensive when we're challenged. And that can be really hard because we all want to be good people and we want people to think we're good people. We're all trying hard and we're all trying to do our best. And it can be hard to hear, I think, that someone's experience of us hasn't been our best. So I think listening and accepting lived experience, and Ellen's story was such a good example of that. I think the ways that she kind of talked about that, take people at their word, even when it can be uncomfortable for us. It's very important work, and we are definitely better people for it when we can find the space and the generosity of her. I mean, I thought her generosity was amazing to say, you know, don't shame people who don't know. Once they know, they can do better.
Yeah, definitely. I think as Irish people, you know, we're quite good at telling stories and listening to people's stories and their lived experiences. And so I think, yeah, and sort of to touch on what you said earlier, like you know, passing up a seat or giving a voice. You know, maybe you're not telling your story tonight, maybe someone else can speak up and lots of people can get something out of it. So
yeah, it's funny when I was thinking this morning about so I left Ireland when I was 11 and did all my high schooling in Australia, and then my family moved back to Ireland and I moved to London, and so I kind of spent quite a lot of time kind of going back and forth to Ireland a lot. And when I went back in my 20s, when I would go home, I had a shaved head and a black leather jacket, and people would stare and sometimes they would swear. I would get quite a hard time. My mother was mortified at how people would behave towards me. And I remember going back just after marriage equality with my female partner, who's also from Dublin, and our 2-year-old son. And people were falling over themselves to make us feel welcome and accepted. And it was so beautiful. Like it really felt so much. And it's incredible how the world has changed in such a short amount of time, but also how willing people were to change. They just needed to know how to be different or how to do things differently.
Yeah.
And they were delighted with themselves. I've always felt like Irish people were kind of smug at what a good job they'd done on marriage equality.
Yeah.
And it was great. It was great. So, you know, I feel very optimistic.
Great. Yes, that's a great note to end on, positive, optimistic note. It's good. It's nice to see that you have seen that change happen at home. And I genuinely do think that you are a massive like agent for that change. I know, like I took your class at UCID and, you know, started thinking about all of these things we've been discussing tonight. And I sort of, you know, entered into this world, and I just, think your work is fantastic, and you're educating future generations on it. So thank you for that.
Thank you. That means a lot.
So thank you so much, Julie. We're going to move on to the next session tonight on the nominations, but just in the interest of time, a lot of the nominations are up on our socials, on our Instagram, Irish Support Agency, if you'd like to take a look. But there's one in particular I'd like to read out. And it was submitted by Roisin Trainer, about a great supporter of the Irish Support Agency, Joan Butler. So I'm just going to read it out here. I have loved getting to know Joan and her amazing story of strength and resilience over the last few years. Joan's positive attitude and outgoing nature is inspirational to me, especially when her usual social outlets were closing during COVID. Her friendly personality and genuine interest in others means she is well known and respected in her local community. I don't think there is a barista in Botany that doesn't know her coffee order by heart. So we have Joan Butler here with us tonight, and I'd love to ask you a few questions, Joan. I've heard so much about you, and you have great stories to tell. And you know, you're a well-known woman in the Irish community here in Sydney. So I'm happy for you to talk about whatever you'd like to talk about. Would you like to discuss how you came to Australia? And I know you worked as a nurse as well.
Yes, I was working in London, and I'd met an Australian guy, and he wasn't bad, and so I could come here for £10. I thought, oh well, you know, £10 isn't a lot of money. So he went off back home to Australia, and then I came to Australia. I came by ship, had a marvelous time. I mean, I got to Melbourne where he lived. I looked down and I saw this small fat man. I thought, oh my God, what have I done? I'm certainly not marrying this fella, although I come this far. So I got off the ship and said hello and hello to his sister-in-law. I worked in Melbourne for a few months. Now I had to give 2 years in Australia. That was the big thing. I had to be here for 2 years. Then I came to Sydney. Didn't do like Sydney because I worked at Concord Repattern. It was too far out and nobody was doing that. And so then I went up to Queensland because I have to do everything in 2 years because I was going back in 2 years, but the memory failed me there. So I went to Queensland, and then a girl in Queensland said, no, you should have come to Sydney. Sydney's the right place. So I got a beautiful flat at King's Cross. So now I was in the center of the city. And while I was there, I met another girl I met, Irish. Through a blind date, I met my husband. So I married here an Irishman. Well, then that was the end of going back to Ireland. And I've got 4 children and 7 grandchildren. I love every bit of Australia. Just love it.
Yeah, amazing. That's a wonderful story. You've traveled so much as soon as you got here, and it sounds like you had. Yeah, you had a lot of women supporting you. You made a lot of friends quite quickly. Was it difficult to start a family here back then? Did you have any support?
Not really. I arrived at the case in the dream, and I've always had the dream. I still have the dream. You know, if you have a dream, it helps. And so I met the husband, and he was Irish, and we had very little, but we got on and we bought a unit in Randwick, and then I bought a house in Botany, and 4 children arrived, and now I've got 7 grandchildren, so I'm quite happy.
Wow,
you know?
Wow, that's amazing. And where did you work as a nurse?
In Sydney, I worked at Concord, I worked at Prince Alfred, I worked everywhere. I worked in lots of hospitals. Yeah, I did a lot of work. I did a lot of private work as well. There was plenty of work. In those days, the best part of your passport was that certificate that you were Irish. You could get work anywhere. They were desperate for nurses here, then desperate. So there was plenty of jobs, you know, you could pick and choose as you liked. And people were so kind. Really, people are, if you are reasonably good, they are kind to you, you know, and they put themselves out to help you.
Yeah, definitely. God, it always seems like Australia is always dying for nurses. There's always Irish nurses coming over. Don't think it ever stops. So what about your connection to the Irish community here in Sydney?
I love them. They're so good and so supportive to me, and they've always helped me, and I love going there. And we play the cards. I also play bridge, you know, that game bridge, not to do with Irish. So I'm fairly good with cards, and then I go to the Irish Centre, and I'm fairly astute with cards. Now we're playing for nothing, but I would argue over it. We're playing for nothing. At the end, I'll win nothing, but that doesn't mean I'm going to get you. You're not going to get away with a thing from me. And so, and the Irish fellas at the INA, they loved that. You know, I had to play. One time I said, "Look, I'll do the teas." Don't even think about doing the teas, Joan. You play the cards. They loved somebody playing the cards that was enthusiastic about the cards, you know? And I love playing cards, loved it, yeah. And those people were just so lovely to me. They still are lovely, yeah.
Yeah, I heard that you give the men a hard time with the cards. All right.
I'm no pushover. I know the cards backwards, and you're not going to get away with a thing. Yeah, and we're playing for nothing, remember, but that doesn't mean a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. You're definitely the leader of the pack, Joan. So one last question for you. You've been in Sydney for so long, and you're so involved in the community here, and you've raised a whole family here. Do you have any advice for women today?
Oh, I'd say do whatever your heart desires and just get up there and get out there. Don't sit behind the door. Get out and be amongst the people. Okay?
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time tonight, Joan. Yeah, great.
For bringing.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. So I think that's it for tonight, folks. Thank you so much for joining in. I hope somebody got something out of it tonight. And yeah, next month, the first Monday of every month, there's a Dóchas webinar, and feel free to look at the Irish Support Agency website and YouTube channel. And St. Patrick's Day is obviously coming up in a couple of weeks, so happy early St. Patrick's Day to everyone, and good night and God bless. Thank you.